Good evening. Welcome from Tampa, Florida, the world headquarters of University Consultants in America. My name is Bob LeVine. I am the CEO and founder of UCA. And tonight we're going to talk about admissions into U.S. colleges as well as U.S. graduate schools. To get started off, I would like to make a very special thanks to Dr. Panda for setting all this up. We appreciate it, and I hope you get some great value out of tonight's webinar. Before we get started, a few things. First, questions. We want to answer your questions. We will answer the questions at the end of my presentation. Please use either the Q&A or the chat function that you'll see at the bottom of your Zoom window. A little bit about UCA. We are a full-service independent consultancy. That means we help students get into undergraduate school, which we call college, graduate schools, and that includes medical, business, law, dental, veterinary, engineering, anything. Transfer students, basically any application in the English language, we can help. Most of our clients who live in Asia look to the US, the UK, and Canada. Please understand that the US and UK are very different systems with very different evaluation methods. And we can talk about that if you have questions, but for now, we're going to talk about the US method. A little bit about me. I graduated from Harvard a long time ago. I spent 29 years volunteering with Harvard admissions. The last several, I was the chairperson of the interview and stuff that happens here in the West Coast of Florida. I've been a consultant for 7 years and have worked with over 1,000 students. But here at UCA, we have an interactive team. Our other professionals who are in the office come from Princeton and from Yale and from MIT. We have former admissions people. We have former high school counselors. We have those who are trained in psychology and early childhood development. It is an organic team atmosphere. We share ideas all the time. We brainstorm every day. You're not just hiring one consultant when you talk about UCA. Okay, now let's get into the good stuff. Let's talk about how schools evaluate. Now tonight, because we're talking about both college and graduate school, I'll take one and then the other, but you'll understand how it all kind of fits together. I'm going to talk about undergraduate first. I need you to understand that public and private universities in the United States are very different. The public universities are much more like what we see around the world. They tend to accept students because of qualifications, because of their numbers, because of their achievement. They tend to be large. They tend to give you what they want to give you, and you pick from a pre-created set of classes. And they do a pretty good job. However, their number one job is to educate the people of their state. So if it's the University of California, the people of the great state of California are the ones who should be benefiting. Although for monetary purposes, all the public schools like to grab people from outside of their state and outside of the United States because it means money to them. But understand that the way they evaluate is going to be pretty straightforward. It's a little weird this year. Because of COVID and social pressures, testing is not required almost anywhere. It is in the state of Florida still, but some places are test optional and some places are test blind. But basically the public schools are going to look at your resume of grades and test scores and some of the extracurriculars. The private schools start from a whole different mentality. The private schools are looking for contributors. You see, they see education as more than just classes. They try to keep people on campus all 4 years. It is a residential system where possible. And the idea is that smart people from around the world with different experiences, different philosophies, different things to say, will interact each other and train each other outside the classroom. The system they use is called holistic because they're actually looking for the entire person, the whole person. It's not just about your qualifications. In fact, the holistic system is more about your contribution than it is your qualifications. I know that seems strange to almost all of you, but that's how it works. In fact, I want to show you how it works. I'm now going to share with you a document that I used for years as I volunteered with Harvard. This is the actual Harvard admissions interview report. Pulling up now for you to see. Essentially, in the holistic method, they evaluate three things. The first is academics. It's a school. The second would be what happens outside the classroom, what one might call extracurriculars, but it's really anything that happens outside the classroom. And the third is who you are as a human being. Those add up to an overall rating. They literally grade you numerically in three places, and then they don't really total them up. They just kind of come up with an overall number based upon what they saw. It is a very human process. It is a very subjective process. It's not random. It's subjective. Why? Because human characteristics can't be graded by a computer. They're evaluated by people. And this is why our private schools in particular look for more pieces in the application: essays, recommendation letters, reports from the school, interviews. In fact, Stanford University rejects 90% of the perfect test scores in favor of those without perfect test scores. You might wonder how that happens. Well, historically, and it changed this year, but historically, Stanford has 12 essays in its application, plus at least 2 recommendations, a report from the school, and an interview. That is 16 things that are written that are entirely subjective. And after you've read 16 things that are good or okay, nobody cares about the test scores. That's how it works. In fact, I want to show you one more thing. This is a quote from my former Harvard admissions rep, Sophia. About 2 months ago, I interviewed a whole bunch of admissions people, from dean to volunteers and everything in between, for an article to be published. This is what Sophia said when it comes to how the academics of an applicant fit in the overall evaluation. If I were to assign percentages to the impact of academics versus the other choices, especially for those schools who have the luxury of choosing whom they want, academics is at best 10% of the consideration. Check the academic box, then move on. What's the weight of that other 90%? Now, you may find this very strange and probably don't believe it. Please do believe it. The concept is known as reader love. There is a moment when the admissions people just embrace a candidate. That moment does not happen when they see a test score or a grade. It happens in those written pieces. That's where it just gets to you. And we see this in the office all the time. If an essay is good enough, people just thrill over it. And it happened yesterday. If not, it's good. That happened to me about 4 months ago when Hermenegildo said to me, it's good. Rats. It's not good enough. So I had to go back in and work on it a little more, get more of the student's voice in, move some things around. And then I read it to him again. He didn't realize it was the same person. And he starts gushing about how much he wants to work with this person. That's how it works in our private schools. So roughly, if you use rankings, and we try not to, but if you do, the top 20 schools in America use a system that is not fully based on numbers. They use numbers, but they look at other things. So for those applications, for those schools, it's a 2-step process. The part of the application that has the background and the school and the courses and the grades and the test scores and the resume, please just stay in the game. Be above the line. Be in consideration. Avoid the head scratch. I don't get it. If that happens, you're out. But if you get past that into the essays, now you do something different. In the first part, you want to avoid a negative. In the second part, you pursue a positive. Charm them somewhere. See, these people are using very human responses. Strangely, it's a lot like dating. They're putting you into a community, and they are the gatekeeper. Why people choose people is a little bit mysterious. It is not random. It is subjective. And that's where the nuts and bolts of what we do, at least this time of season, can make a very big difference. Now, when we talk about graduate schools, they're looking for different things. The medical schools are looking for essentially three things. Tremendous grades in the core classes. Organic chemistry, get a good grade. Basket weaving, they don't really care. Number two, a great score on the MCAT admissions test. Number three, a great resume. And it's in number three that people tend to fail. We'll get back to that in a moment. For business schools, they want to see experience in the real world. Business professors all the time, MBA professors will say this: how can you teach somebody to manage other people when they've never had a job? So business students need context to learn what is taught. Those who go straight from undergraduate to a graduate school, at a good school, that generally doesn't happen. At a mid-grade school, it can happen, and the professors just make fun of them. But business wants experience. Other schools, law school, they don't really care. Number one, graduate from undergrad. Number two, take the LSAT and try to get a good score. And number three, can you pay them? It's more simplified. So those are roughly how they do what they do. But I know people are very excited and worried about how do we build that resume. And that's a very important thing for us to discuss tonight. We're going to talk about what happens for college and for graduate school. It's a little different. There are some things in common, but let's first talk about undergraduate college. Let's talk about what doesn't work for the best schools. The goal and the people who are most often accepted into Harvard, Yale, Princeton, MIT, Stanford, and all the rest that you know about, those are what we call doers. These are people who just do things naturally. They are self-motivated. They initiate things all on their own. So what doesn't work? In America, we call it the helicopter parent. You might know it as Tiger Mom. Doesn't work. You can't just pull somebody and make them into a self-motivated doer. So one of the things we do with the high school families is talk about year to year how the roles should change, help everybody with communication, and try to allow the student to grow. And I know it seems like, well, maybe they'll trip and they'll fall and it'll be a problem. Strangely, in America, we like that. We like the idea that there's been a challenge and that the student has overcome the challenge. It's actually part of the choices for the main essay prompt, the Common App personal statement. And in admissions, it's a concept we call GRIT, G-R-I-T. Go ahead and Google it. College admissions GRIT. It's very, very important because they know the students will be challenged at these incredible schools. They don't want the first problem to happen then because bad things can happen. The ability to show how to overcome is important to us. Perfect grades, less important. So to the extent that this worries you to let go, please have confidence, not only that America is good with that, but also that strangely humans are good with that because humans tend to prefer imperfection, not perfection. We like things that are asymmetrical, not perfectly symmetrical. It's a human response. That's just human nature. But the point is, you need to become a doer. Now, you probably want to know how they evaluate. I'm going to show you. Now, you've seen the Harvard report, but I want to go into a bit more depth so that you can see the 4 factors that they use in evaluating these activities. Okay, going to pull them up for you right now and share them. You want to take a screenshot? Great. You want to write them down? They're not long. You're not going to be able to use it as a checklist. Checklists don't work. Not in admissions and not in getting there. The 4 factors in evaluating extracurricular activities are length of time, quality of performance, the breadth of impact, and originality. So let's just talk about length of time. If you have played violin for 10 years, it's better than if you played for 10 days. I think you can figure that one out. Number 2, quality of performance. If you're the president, it's better than being a participant. If you win an Olympic gold medal, it's better than being last place in the bobsled. How well you do makes a difference. Number 3 is impact, but not just impact, breadth of impact. Let us distinguish the idea of catching a ball from throwing the ball. It's not all about you. It's about us. So whom have you impacted and where are they? If it's within your high school, great, because you go further. Is it within your city? Better. Within your state, your region. Are you impacting people all around the United States or perhaps even all over the world? Because the further the geographic spread of your impact, the better. And finally, originality. Now I call this the nose on your face. We all have noses on our faces, but they're kind of hard to see. Take a look. So I always say, put your finger on there and try to see the tip. It's not very easy. Originality is the nose on the face that everybody forgets about. And I want to give you an example. About 4 years ago, I was giving a talk at the Chinese Students Association in Orlando, Florida. At the end of the talk, a question. Does America look at us all the same? No, and yes. You see, they look at you individually. Multiple people review your application. They're not looking at you in a group. They're just evaluating you. However, you guys are all in the Chinese Students Association. You have a very strong culture. Many of you play piano or violin. In the Indian culture, it's dance and bhangra drums. Within high schools, there are cultures. At an IB school near us, everybody likes Relay for Life, which is a cancer thing. But here's the thing. If everybody does all the same stuff, why do they need you? So it's important to do those group activities because they want to understand you in the campus community. But it's also important to do something that others do not. Originality, the 4th factor, makes a difference. Like I said, this doesn't really work as a checklist, but I want you to see that this is not about doing more things. It's about doing better things, because here's the theory. If you have done something amazing in the first 17 years of life, you might do it again. However, if you haven't, why should they assume that they can take you out of your home, away from your family, away from the only school structure you've ever known, away from your friends, in classes you know nothing about, going towards careers you know nothing about, and then all around you, there's alcohol and worse, and that'll turn you into a superachiever? No. What they're looking for outside the classroom is something special that you can add to the group. This is where contribution makes a big difference. Okay. Now, beyond effective parenting, which is very important in allowing people to grow, what does work? The first thing is to remember what you've done. It's amazing how time erases memory. Even when you go to sleep, what you learned during the day kind of erased. Your short-term memory disappears. Okay. One of the most important things you can do is keep a log. a log of what's happened, everything. And in this respect, I think, and we always recommend that students make notes about, well, remember those 6 words I taught you in elementary school, the 6 question words? Who, what, where, when, why, how? Write them in your log. Those are important. Important not only to help you with your memory, but important to allow the people in the admissions office who are reading your application to understand things. Because if you want them to see something, you have to give them a thing. The only things that are actually things are nouns. Nouns allow the admissions people to see you in their head. And please understand, they're moving really quickly. How quickly? A Vanderbilt admissions representative told me that some days they will read each 60 applications. Now, do the math. It's about 5 minutes per application. They're moving quickly. They're skimming. So from our perspective as professionals helping students, we think it's very important that they actually understand what the students are saying and take notice of it. And those nouns can do that. So put the details into the log. This is true for undergraduate or graduate school. Sometimes the difference isn't what they've done, but how they've presented what they've done, because it doesn't really exist in the admissions world until it's in the application. Now, for graduate school, they want to see experience in the direction that you're going to study. If you want to apply to medical school, they want to see experience in the health sciences, not in swimming. If you're going to business school, they want to see experience in business. But how do you get it? It's actually very difficult. In most universities, the internships, research positions, and other opportunities, there aren't that many of them. And so what they'll do is put the more senior students first. So if you're a little older at the school, you're going to get the first shot of working with a professor in a lab. If you're a freshman, probably not going to happen. Sophomore, maybe. Somewhere during junior year, if you're looking at medical school, that's when you're going to start to get some of the good stuff. And then just a few months later, it's time to apply to medical school and you haven't really had a chance to build the resume. So the starting point in building a more robust graduate school resume really isn't to pursue the opportunities that they post, really isn't to use your resume to get a great opportunity. In fact, in life, we always tell students, don't get a job based on your resume, get a job based upon a network of people. Because people open doors in ways that a resume does not. Trust me, I have Harvard on my resume. Oh, I get the interview. Doesn't mean you get the job. How do you get the job? Somebody knows you. Somebody is willing to bring you in, even though your resume does not say you're qualified. Networking works because it allows students at a younger age to get opportunities. This happened in my family about 5 years ago. I was at my vet and we took our niece. Our niece wants to be a veterinarian. And so I asked the doctor and she let my niece go back in the back and do some simple things with my dog. And when she walked out, I said, Doc, I have a question. When she goes to college, would you like some free help? And Dr. Laura said, Bob, for you? Of course. And so if you have a student who is in the early years of college, help them with your network. Now, their network starts with some people they know and a couple of professors, but if it's medical school, they have a doctor. They could ask their doctor. You could ask your doctor. You probably know other doctors, or you know people who have other doctors. Get on the phone, get on the email. Use the human network to build that resume and get opportunities. and even during COVID. It is possible. It is possible because of the internet. We're on it right now. The internet connects everybody. Now, I'm going to show you a WhatsApp message from one of my students in Indonesia. Aditya is a freshman. He is studying at Harvard, but not really at Harvard because, COVID, quarantines, immigration, stuff like that. Trying to find his quote here. There we go. One of the things I told him was this: when you go off to university, try to make it a habit to talk to the professors, because each professor has 30 plus years of experience. And you can get 30 plus years of information that's not on Google just by talking to them. And I said to him, Aditya, if you can commit to doing this every week with a different professor, by the time you graduate, you'll have 4,500 years of experience that you wouldn't have otherwise. And to show you the power of the network, I want to show you this WhatsApp message, because Aditya never even got to Harvard yet, but here's what it says. Oh, and I did your talking to a new professor every week thing. So I talked with this professor who's doing research on some cool stuff and offered me a position for remote research. Can be done. So in building that resume, please do try to focus on the people who can help you. And the internet can get you there. Now we're going to go over towards the different types of essays. Before we do, I want to remind you that if you use the Q&A or chat functions, I'll be able to answer questions. We'll be about 10, 15 more minutes, and then you get your questions answered by me. All right, let's talk about admissions essays. The big scary essay that happens in undergraduate is called a personal statement. There is another essay that is very popular, which is known as the why essay. Why do you want to go to our school? Why do you want to study that at our school? And frankly, as much as everybody gets so caught up into the personal statement, if there's a why essay, the why essay is more important, and it's much harder. We'll talk about the pieces of that. But I want you to recognize that why do you want to go to our school is also what they're asking if you want to transfer or for graduate school. Whether it's medical school, law school, business school, they will always ask you a variation of the why. Does this make sense essay? So let's first talk about the personal statement. There are books written about the personal statement. If you can't sleep at night, go ahead and read them. The essays in them, they're not very good. In fact, when you look at a book like 50 Successful Harvard Application Essays, and that's a real book, well, I call it the Book of Lies. It is not 50 successful essays. It's essays from 50 successful applicants. And the interesting thing is, it is published by the Harvard Crimson student newspaper, and they didn't get the essays from the admissions office. You know where they got them? From people like me who pay money to put them in the book. They're not good. So I want to tell you some things that the personal statement is not. It is not an expanded resume. The application is designed to give the admissions office everything they need when it comes to the resume. It is designed to address those personal qualities, character, the human elements. That's why it's called a personal statement. So you don't have to do an expanded resume, and you try to avoid what is called the 4 Ds. You don't have to remember these. It's pretty simple. Death, depression, drugs, divorce. To put another way, avoid the big D. If it's a downer, don't do it. You're trying to create a relationship. Try not to depress them. Now, if you did have cancer, fine, but use that as the setup for what you did to overcome the challenge, that grit that we were talking about earlier. And I also want to dissuade you from the idea that you need an essay that's perfect. No, you're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. And the one class that's required in undergrad, writing. They don't expect you to sound like a 59-year-old grammarian, so grammar doesn't do it. The 4 pieces or attributes of a great writing, particularly for personal statements, are as follows. Number 1, the right message. The message for the personal statement for undergrad is tell us about you personally and how you interact with other people interpersonally. Make sure you're not the only person in your essay. Otherwise, how do they know you'll talk to anybody? Number 2, the right structure. Essays of different length should have a different structure. Essays of different purpose should have a different structure. The book War and Peace has a structure designed for the reader who likes to read really long novels. The instructions to build a bookshelf at IKEA also have a structure. It better be perfect order or that bookshelf's not going to look right. A personal statement essay also has a structure. A why essay has a structure. They all have structure. You need the right one to get the best results. So the second attribute is structure. The third attribute is detail. Remember when I talked about putting down those details and specifics of who, what, where, when, why, how? Detail wins. Detail allows for them to see. It is the clothing that wraps the message. As an example, if I say a word right now, you will probably see it, and the word is camel. You can see it now. My question is, does your camel have 1 hump or 2 humps? Because they come in 2 different models. So you need the right message, the right structure, good detail, and voice. Not grammar, not style, not theme or syntax or punctuation. Voice, sound natural, sound like you. Don't try to sound like somebody else. Those are restrained essays. That's what we call them. Restrained template essays. They never work. Do not overwork this stuff. It's got to sound like the student. In fact, many of our students have actually gotten into colleges, great colleges, without our help. Why? They didn't have time. They waited to the last minute. Not necessarily because they're procrastinators. I'll give you the example of Patrick. Patrick was at a private school and his former friend and arch enemy got into Stanford in the early phase. Patrick figured, Stanford's not taking 2 from our school. And at the end of the summer, he said, I can't not apply to Stanford. I've always thought about doing it. So on December 30, he started writing an application that was due on January 1. Now, he had the advantage of some work he'd already written with us, and he knew what to do because we had trained him, but Patrick just ripped it off. And Mom and Patrick both say those are the most authentic, genuine, funny essays I've ever done. Patrick is at Stanford. Last minute, relaxed. Message, structure, detail, voice. Now, that is true of all essays, but I do want to talk about the why essay, because a why essay will be seen for undergraduate, it will be seen for transfer, it will be seen pretty much for every graduate application. There are 4 parts to this. It's pretty simple. What is your direction? What is your path? Where are you going? Number 2, when and how did that direction begin? Look back historically. What happened to make you want to be a doctor? My grandmother had cancer. Okay, now I understand how it started. What have you done since then in this direction? Your experience, your pursuit of this goal. So what is your path? When and how did it start? What are you doing on it? And why does our school make sense for you? It's that last one that's really hard. The first part, you should know that. That's all about you. The last part, that's all about them. And between you as an applicant and them as admissions officers, well, they know the school a lot better than you do. They go there every day. And so when kids just pull stuff off of a website, it doesn't work. Really, they have to understand the school naturally, deeply, completely. They have to understand the school's philosophy of education, because every school actually in America tries to teach things in the best possible way, and they do it differently. But philosophy is not a mission statement you can go grab. You have to dig a little deeper, and we have methods for that. Number two would be, how do they design their curriculum? Because they don't do it the same. That curriculum is designed based upon the philosophy of the school. A couple of years ago, we were helping a student from Brazil apply to MBA, Graduate Business School. And his first three choices were Stanford, UC Berkeley, and UCLA. And I had him look at the structure of each of the curriculum. And he noticed something very different. Stanford does not require marketing as an MBA class. Now, marketing is one of the most important things in business, and it's not required? Why is that? Because Stanford understands that the people who need marketing will get a master's in marketing if they're in the marketing department, or if they're the CEO, they don't need to get an MBA at all. So the curricula are different. So you need to understand the philosophy, how they design the curriculum. You then need to take a look at the kind of classes that are available. You can take a look at internships that are available, clubs that are available. But it's basically a pyramid that's got to start with the student really understanding the school. And that's the problem with the YSs, whether it's undergraduate, transfer, or graduate school. You got to know that one. And that's a hard one. 100% of our students will have a YSA kicked back without editing because they didn't do it right. We tell them over and over. We give them papers, examples, webinars. We go take them through exercises and practices, and we interrogate them on how to do this. And then they kind of kick back into being a kid and do a poor job. That ain't going to help. So when they read your essays for undergrad or graduate school, that's when the desire to accept you really comes in. So there are a lot of similarities, just a few differences. There aren't that many variations on essays. Sure, there are some that are quite esoteric and creative, but for the most part, it's been done many times, and the students will do them over and over again. I now want to talk about another piece of the puzzle, interviews. And as I said, I interviewed for Harvard for 29 years, done this one. What happens in an undergraduate what happens in an undergraduate interview is very different than what happens in a graduate interview. For undergraduate, for college, the interviews are not assigned based upon the caliber of the applicant. In other words, getting an interview does not mean you have made the cut, and not getting an interview doesn't mean you missed the cut. It has nothing to do with that at all. They try to interview everyone. Now, the interviews can be colossally important in this process, even though they're across the board. Why? Because chronologically, the interview happens after they have graded the application. Internally, they read the application, they give it a number grade, they kind of put it in a pile, and then later, this one separate piece comes in. And that piece can differentiate those in the possible probable pile. If you get a great interview, zoom. If you don't, probably not going to happen for you because they don't care about you and they have to embrace you with this reader love. Now, please also understand that this is not necessarily the interview that they see. In most cases, the undergraduate interview is performed by alumni. They're only going to see an interview report. So a lot of what we do is to teach our students not just how to do a good interview, but how to help the interviewer write a report that is effective in the mind of the admissions representative. With COVID, not so many live interviews, 0 live interviews right now. But historically, there have been digital video interviews as long as there's been the digital interface of chat. And this happens in different parts of the world. It certainly happened for everybody this year. There's not much difference in the interview. There are a couple of skills that are slightly different. In a live one, you'll shake hands. In a digital one, you won't. In a digital one, you're looking somewhere else, not at the screen all the time. There's a different amount of energy, how to end the interview. There's some mild variations, but what happens in that interview isn't really going to change. Before I get to a different variation interview, I want to explain the difference between an undergraduate and a graduate interview. Because the undergraduate interview is conducted by somebody who is an alum, they don't get the file. They know nothing about the applicant. In fact, as an interviewer, I can tell you they get 5 pieces of information: name, high school, address, phone, email. I can't tell you how many times I walked into Starbucks, and that's where 65% of them are done. And I had no idea not only who the person was, but whether they were a boy or girl. It's a little weird. So that interview, there's a different kind of preparation. Really, we prepare our undergraduates for interviews to be the puppeteer, not the puppet. Remember, the admissions person who is interviewing, isn't really an admissions person. They're just an alumnus or alumna who doesn't know anything about you. So we have them create a menu of things that they want to talk about. And in fact, the students are in control of that interview because they know everything about themselves and the interviewer knows nothing. And so a great interview is where the interviewer doesn't have to ask any questions, and we show students how to do that. But for graduate school, they have looked at your file. They have decided you are worthy of an interview, and most likely the people interviewing you are on the committee. It's much more of an interrogation. And so there's some different kind of preparation. Although truthfully, the things that the students must do are exactly the same. They're trying to find you. The advantage to the interviewer of the grad school is they have your resume already. They can ask you questions from the resume. But again, it's your resume. You should know everything about it. They're not going to ask you philosophical things or how the newest MRI machine works. They're going to try to find out about the candidate. And for certain schools, they look for different qualities. Medical schools tend to like perseverance, which is why they tend to like musicians so much. But it is a kind of different thing. And for those who get the luck of having an interview with multiple interviewers at the same time, it is lucky, because there's a strange dynamic between the people who are doing the interview. They don't even know what to do. I question, your question, whatever. And they're so messed up. For the interviewee, for the candidate, it's easier. But we're seeing a lot more of these online interviews. And in exchange for an interview, we have been seeing over the last few years recordings, 3-minute recordings. For the undergrad and graduate school, again, they're slightly different. But for the pre-recording ones, they're really only slightly different, because they can't interrogate you on questions. These, again, have more to do with the personality and allowing them to see you and hear you and get a feel for you. And strangely, you don't try to push your resume. They've already got that. One of our former students volunteered in the University of Chicago admissions office for 3 years, and he always told me about this guy they called Singing Boy, who did his 3-minute pre-recorded thing trying to sing. And everybody loved him because he couldn't sing. It was just genuine and bare and courageous. And they liked it so much, you can find it on YouTube. That's how much they like the guy who's just doing something different. So it's not really an opportunity to re-argue your case. It's to add that human element, even when it's pre-recorded. Before we get to the questions, I see we have some coming up. Just a couple of updates since COVID. The first is this testing problem. This is the, what do we do about SAT or ACT? Because they keep getting canceled. Throughout America for this year, for the high school class of 2021, pretty much every school except for the state ones in Florida are test optional, which means you do not have to submit a test. That can be powerful. If your score is just below what you want, you don't need to put it in there. It's going to make it more difficult for the admissions people. When interviewing them, they all told me that they're kind of miss that information. They were used to that data set that makes a universal understanding of where everybody fits. But for this year, most people maybe won't have an SAT or ACT to report. However, if you do have a good one, put it in there. It's a little bit like, and I apologize, but I was a lawyer for 25 years. I'm sorry for that. But it's a little bit like being in a courtroom where the judge says to the jury, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that last piece of testimony was really cool. And it totally tells you who should win the case. But it wasn't brought into evidence correctly. So here's what I want you to do. Disregard it. Don't take it into account. Forget about it. Look, if they see a perfect test score on your application, they're going to see it. But that's a different thing. And that is true this year. It probably will not be true next year. For those who are in 11th grade, yeah, you should be preparing to take it. Now, balance the need to take it with your health concerns. We don't want you catching COVID just to take a test. But let's not think, hey, I don't have to take it. Usually the people that say, hey, I don't have to take a test are the people with terrible grades. The application is an opportunity to impress them. Take the opportunity. How to research schools in a world where you can't get there. Well, the truth is most people, when they visit a university, kind of do the wrong thing. They kind of play into the hands of the university's marketing department. Usually two parts of the visit, which would be an information session and an official tour. And in both cases, they're trying to sell you. They want your money. They want you to come. These are very generic. The information sessions, basically, if you take your students by the third time, they don't want to be there anymore. It's a lousy reason to go across the United States to find schools. And in the formal tours, the quality of that tour depends on the quality of the tour guide, the size of the group, how annoying some of the people are in the group, and the weather. There's a reason why the University of Miami in Coral Gables, Florida, does not conduct tours in the summer. Lightning. They don't want to scare you. There's a reason why the University of Chicago starts reaching out to everybody around Memorial Day at the end of May. They really don't want you to come when it's snowy because you won't be that impressed. So understand that visiting a school to research the school can be done if you do it the right way. And that is to look for things that are not available online. Their entire curriculum can be seen online. Their clubs can be found online. What can you find on campus? The human element. Are people interacting? Do they walk together? Do they ride bicycles? Do they drive? How do students interact? Because what you see is what you get. And you can still visit, even though they may be closed. You're just not going to see humans interacting, which is the same thing that happens if you come during a holiday or over the summer. But researching schools is really something that starts online and always has and always should have, at least since the internet came out. It starts by understanding what they are doing. Remember the why essay? What's their philosophy? What's the structure of their academics? What are they doing? You need to understand that. Fit is the key to success. And if you don't understand them and you'll never figure it out. They want to see the right fit. And many times they will not accept a student because they don't think that's the right person for them. They may like you, but you're coming into the wrong place. And there are ways to do that. Look for places where they talk naturally. For example, Facebook. The school newspaper has an audience, the students and the alumni. Whatever they're talking about on campus is designed for the people who are on campus and have been on campus. Take a look at what the editorial board puts out there every day. You'll see what they're all about because they're talking about it. There are lots of methods to do it, and one that people just forget about is calling the admissions office. That's their job, to talk to you about the school. And when I was talking to Gracie at DePaul about 2 months ago, I mentioned that. She says, I know, we're dying for people to call us. Nobody ever does. It's amazing what you can find out. Do your initial research, call them, listen, ask intelligent questions, go back and forth. It can be done even without COVID. COVID hasn't taken away your best research. It's taken away some of the worst research. But there's one other thing that's changed. That other thing is a concept we call demonstrating interest. You see, the job of a school and admissions person is not to give you an offer. It's to get a student. They have to collect you. And they use a concept called yield. What percent will come? Now imagine for the moment that you are the admissions person for, I don't know, a number 20 school, and you give out 100 offers to students in the great state of Florida this year, and 0 decide to come to your school. Do you want to be in the meeting with the supervisor and the dean of admission when you've collected nobody? So they want to see that you've been demonstrating interest. There are lots of ways to do it, and not every school does it the same way. Not every student should do it the same for every school they pick. But what has happened with COVID is that the schools are now reaching out much more in digital meetings where the deans or the admissions representatives talk about the school. And they're doing a lot more data mining. They're looking to see who is reaching out for them to identify who will be coming to their school. That has changed. We assume that next year there'll be a more balance, but there's no doubt in my mind that the concept of demonstrating interest has changed. In fact, this stuff changes every day. This is what we do all day long. In fact, 3 days ago, the appellate court made its ruling on that lawsuit that the Chinese Americans brought against Harvard. Now, you may recall that in the trial court, Harvard won. In the appeals court, Harvard won again. And that didn't surprise me at all as a lawyer and an expert in admissions. The system that Harvard uses was approved by the Supreme Court in the 1970s in a case called Bakke, B-A-K-K-E. In a footnote, they said, the University of California, you're doing it wrong. Use the Harvard system. And this idea that the schools are not being nice to certain ethnicities or nationalities is just incorrect. In fact, statistically, there are more than 3 times more Asians in our American schools than the population of Asians in the US. There's only about 2/3 the number of white Western European types in the schools as contrasted with the population of the US. It's not that they don't like you. It's that people just don't understand the admissions methods. And that's where we come in. Our job is to show you what to do, to inform you, and to train you, and to help you to get your best possible results. Now, for those who want to know more about us, and I'm about to get into the questions, this is a email address that you are welcome to reach out. info@universitycoa.com, University Consultants of America. It's not that hard to understand. But now we're going to go into your questions. So let's take a look at what we've got. One question was about Aditya. What kind of remote research position did that student get? And the thought was, it wasn't bench work, was it? Actually, some of it was. It was just local work in a lab. In fact, he's doing the lab work in Indonesia that would otherwise be done in Cambridge, Massachusetts. For those who are wondering whether this meeting is recorded, yes, we do have a recording. We will make it available. One question is, if I'm going to the University of Berkeley, Cal Berkeley, do they look at quiz scores, test scores? That's a weird one. Let me explain this. The University of California went test optional before anybody else. They're much cooler than everybody else. They're not. But they allowed their 9 universities to make a decision on whether they would be test blind. The difference between optional and blind is that in optional, you don't have to report it. In blind, they're not supposed to look at it. They should take it off of their application. The University of California Board of Regents was allowing every one of the 9 universities to make their own decision whether they would be test blind until there was a lawsuit. A disabled person in a wheelchair said that it's not fair, and the trial court agreed. And suddenly UC went entirely test blind because the judge said they had to. And then they filed an appeal. And an appeal means that the judge's ruling is not final, and therefore it doesn't apply. So right now, will they be looking at test scores? If they're on the application, I'm going to say yes. But we're going to know when the application is finalized. It's out there now, but I've seen applications change. So for the University of California, for undergrad and for transfers, you've got 16 more days to November 30. It's a window. That's all you get. One question is, how impressive is research experience if you are going into science? Okay. For undergraduate, the assumption is the high school kids really aren't doing their own original research. They're getting to play in a lab. Maybe they get their name last on a paper. There are very few who do original research. It's a thing, but it's not the only thing. Now, I told you at the top of this program that the universities in America look at things differently than the universities in the UK. The UK education system is different, and in a sense, it is sped up, started earlier. After grade 10, the decision is made as to continue in university, go for a trade, go get a job, what have you. And in the UK, they're looking for students to know what they want to do right away before they ever finish what they call secondary school, that we call high school. The UK universities, therefore, have something that's much more like our graduate school. They are 3-year programs instead of our 4-year undergraduates. They can add on a master's with 1 more year, or perhaps the PhD with 2. But in the UK, they're much more focused on, this is what I'm doing, man. I'm going deep. I'm doing my research. I'm doing my work. So if you have strong research experience, it will matter in the US. It will definitely matter in the UK. But again, it's only one thing. In terms of your overall presentation, they will look at which courses you took, how you did in the courses that matter to them, whether you took the right tests. Those subject tests for engineering schools, they basically want to see math 2, the higher level, and some science, usually physics or chemistry, maybe biology. So if you're going into a directed program, they want to see a more directed resume. And that's true whether it's medicine or science or Wharton Business School. That's just kind of how it works. Question came up, how important are awards? They can be important. Awards are external proof of achievement. But in the US, you don't necessarily need external proof of achievement. Awards are very much like leadership positions. Being a president allows them to see, yep, check the box, we got a leader, but not all leaders have titles. Those who do a lot of community service are leaders. I don't think Gandhi had a title, or Mother Teresa. So when it comes to leadership, when they see it on there on the resume, check the box, they feel happy. They're going to scan for that. Same thing will be true for awards, but it's not as important as you might think, in the sense that there are parts of the world that don't give out as many awards. For example, in Asia, they don't have anywhere near the number of awards in high school as they do in China. Excuse me, in the US. In the US, there's an award for everything. Not so much else. So we have brilliant students from around the world who have 0 on their academic honors and awards. So getting them are helpful. We work with a group of Indonesians who are known as Olympians, and these guys have been training like Olympians, like they miss whole semesters to train, and they do competitions all over the world. And that's impressive. But for the schools that are looking for a well-rounded, holistic approach, it's only one piece of the puzzle. Here's a good one. How many AP tests do I need? And the specific question is, how important is the number of AP tests a student takes, and how important is it to get 5s on the AP test? Well, the scoring is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 5 is the highest. We recommend you report the 5s and you report the 4s, and 3, 2, 1 is not a big deal. Don't show the stuff you didn't do so well on. It is a piece of the academic puzzle, but they're going to look at the academic puzzle very quickly. How quickly? An MIT admissions rep blogged once that it takes them about a third of a second to look at all of the academics combined. I think that's a little much. I think it takes about 15 seconds. Doesn't take long. They have seen every IB class that exists, every AP class, every Cambridge class, pretty much every class. They know the difference between HL and SL. They know what you take in college. They understand that a class at Harvard is a little different than a class at Northeast, Southwest, Louisiana Tech across the street, school of something, something. They know these are professionals. But here's a statistic that might surprise you. For the best schools in America, the difference between taking 10 AP courses and 5 AP courses in terms of admission, the difference between doubling your APs is 0. No difference. It's just a piece of the puzzle. So let us try to avoid taking all the hardest courses. It's kind of backwards. Why? Taking the hardest courses puts your grades in danger. They're the hardest courses, which means most competition, hardest to get the best grades. That's a problem. Number 2, the hardest courses are the ones that take the most time to study for, which means you don't get to do all of those extracurriculars that contribute outside the classroom that America loves. And you don't sleep as much, which puts your scores in danger. But here's the one that makes the bigger difference. They're going to skim your list of classes. They're trying to find the person. How do they understand you if you take all the hardest classes? How do they know what you like? So here's the recommendation. In the classes that are relevant, that are important to you, that you really like, go deep, go hard, challenge yourself. In the ones that are less important, back off a little bit. And this is true and recommended by the best private schools all around the world. And we were here at UCA definitely recommended. So parents, don't push them into everything. The ones that are most relevant, do that. The ones that are less relevant, relax a little bit. Or use your time wisely and do the other stuff. That's very important. And we did have a question about dual enrollment. Dual enrollment, they understand. And they understand it in one of 2 ways. Either you're taking a class because there is no such class at your high school, and they know your high school. They got a book of information about each high school. Or they know you're just trying to get a better GPA because there's a multiplier that's really high for taking a college class, and it's a game, and they're not impressed. If the school has the class, the high school, take it there. Don't worry about the multipliers. We've seen incredible weighted GPAs of 17 point something. Makes no sense. Most of us just look at the unweighted GPA. So don't get all excited. The best advice is this: take the classes that make sense to you. And from the parenting perspective, just be a parent. Do not try to navigate the admissions process. When you develop the best possible human, you develop the best applicant. That's how it works. So don't try to push them in a certain direction. That just doesn't work. We have time for just a few more questions. One is that, do we recommend the same personal statement for all schools? Or do you tailor to the philosophy of the university? Same for all schools. Because it's not about the university, it's about you. They're looking for you, not to mimic what you think they are. And by the way, not every admissions person likes the same person. Not everyone likes country music. I like punk rock. Not everybody likes sports. We can never guess who is reading you. If there is one thing in the process that is random, it is who will be reading your application. Back in the day when the applications were in paper, they put them in manila folders. And they always have not just one person read, but at least 2. And the second one is called a second reader. Here's how they used to do it. They take the manila files, put them on a shelf, and the second readers will walk in and just grab something off the shelf. That's pretty random. So the idea that you can understand the school so intensely that you should make adjustments to your personal statement, you're missing the point. They're looking for you, not that you're trying to find them. They already know you've applied. They figured it out. Got time for one more. Interesting one. Should I write to the med school admissions officer while waiting to the decision to indicate continued interest or just wait quietly? Yes and no. You're trying to create a relationship. They kind of expect that you will follow up with them, and they kind of want that. In admissions, it's known as a supplement, an update. After your application is in, we don't think you've stopped. Your world isn't over. It is appropriate, it is legitimate, and is often requested that you update with new information. And if you have the admissions officer information, great. And we do have one final question. This is one specific to our company, and I appreciate that. Now, remember, if you do want to know more about us, I'm going to give that again to you right now, so you've got it. info@universitycoa.com. Here we go. And the question is, do we get to choose our consultant? No. Huh? You don't work with just one consultant at UCA. Our company is the only one in the world that uses an interactive team approach. What does that mean? It means that every client is assigned to a client manager. Now, you may think of that as a lead consultant. I think of it as a cowboy, as a supervisor. Their job is to make sure everything is organized, make sure the students are on time, follow up, make sure all questions are answered, make sure all information is sent. They're not the only manager. Internally, we have a manager over all essays, another one over all interviews, another one over all college research. We have two separate databases to follow up. There's about 6 different fail-safes, but the client manager is the human fail-safe for that client, but not the only person. I used to do this all by myself. Trust me when I say this. Everybody has a bad day. Everybody has bias. After a while, everybody starts to sound like the consultant. We want to avoid bias. We want to promote brainstorming. So at our company, you will see 2, maybe 3 of us. You'll definitely see me. You'll see your client manager, and probably one more for a mock interview. But there's about 7 people working with you. And here's how crazy it gets. And I'm going a little deep on here, but I want you to understand. On the personal statement, by the time the topic has come up, there have been at least 3 people who've gotten to know the student. Usually the topic has been roundtabled by 6 of us before they ever start to do anything. But then they'll write an outline. The outline comes in and it's edited by one of our editors, but it's not the client manager. It is an editor who does not know the student at all. Why? Because they're looking for format and to make sure that there's nothing missing. The client manager then spots checks to make sure the student didn't go sideways, but it goes back to the student for a draft. When the draft comes in, we edit it again with a different person. Why? Have you ever looked at your own paper twice or 3 times or 4 times? You don't focus much later. Neither do we. So every step of the process has a different person. Again, a person who doesn't know the student, spot checked by a client manager, back to the student for the student edit, back to us. Internally, we do 2 more edits, one by the client manager to make sure that the thing is complete and balanced, one by our executive editor, plus a proofread, and you're done. By the time it's all done, about 7 people have worked on one essay, and it gets better results. Why don't you get to choose? Because the existing caseload matters, but more importantly, we choose our client managers based upon location and other factors. There are times when things happen. Tests are canceled, or like happened here in Tampa last year, the air conditioning broke and the students were given 8 hours to decide if they wanted to keep the test result, which they weren't told, or retake it. We need people to respond very quickly. And by being able to watch your location, we have other factors. Bill, our president, he happens to be a theater guy, so his specialization is the performing arts students, and strangely also the military applications. But we'll work with that, and you're going to work with all of us. But I get a little ahead of myself. The purpose of tonight is to give you some information. And again, we want to thank Dr. Panda very much for giving us what's really an honor and a privilege. When people consider putting their lives and their children's lives in our hands, we take that seriously. It really is an honor, and we appreciate that. And we treat them like our own kids, and probably a little better because my daughter didn't listen to me either. And so a lot of what we do has to do with communication and making sure everybody's on the same page. This is a team. The team includes us. It includes you. It includes the student. It includes the school. It includes working with the professors to write better recommendation letters, all designed to get the best possible results. Are our results good? No. Our students' results are good. Our job is really to give direction to allow the admissions people to see the brilliance that has happened so far, to give you a fighting chance to make that connection. We're not going to turn you into somebody different. We're going to turn you into the best you and a presentation that reflects the best you. Now, there are differences from school to school and type of school to type of school. We really don't want you to worry too much about that. If you have questions, more questions, we'll be very glad. Just send them to the info address. We'll answer them. If you want to know more about how we do what we do, get with Dr. Panda or contact us for a free consultation. Be very glad. It's an important decision. This is the future. So we want to make sure you make the best possible decision. Anyway, again, I appreciate it. Thanks again to Dr. Panda from the world headquarters of University Consultants of America in Tampa, Florida, 1 hour from Disney World. My name is Bob LeVine. I'm the CEO and founder. I thank you for being patient. I thank you for listening. And I wish you all a very good Saturday evening. Good night.